Welcome to This Good Missouri Politics from Kansas City, and we are joined by the mayor of Kansas City, Mayor Quinton. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back with you.
All right. A lot has happened since the last time we got to sit here and visit with you in the Fountain City. Probably the one thing I saw you actually give some comments on and some compliments was a state senator from St. Louis you know very well, Brian Williams.
Yes.
He passed what I thought was maybe it was a police reform bill,
right.
But it was also a police standards bill that the law enforcement community wanted, and it was an economic development bill in St. Louis. What did you think about the final product? And I guess as a person in politics, you had to tip your hat to a supermajority Republican legislature getting that through.
Well, you know, I think that one thing I've learned from my Democratic friends in the state Senate is how you can get work done, even with odds that are sometimes difficult, and to continue to push a lot of those issues you care about. When I talked to Senator Williams a little while back, long before the bill was introduced, about trying to push through these standards, I thought, how can that possibly get done? And so I commend him for his commitment to it. I commend his entire caucus for their support with it. Certainly there are a few things I didn't like. The police residency in Kansas City was something that I think is important for us, but at the same time, when you look at the measurement of these things, it is important that we keep pushing time and again for progress in Missouri, no matter your position, no matter your party. And I'm glad that we have state senators from this part of Missouri, from the St. Louis Metro, that continue to push each and every day.
Let's talk about a police issue that you've been heavily involved in. The defund the police movement is kind of a buzzword that people use. Yeah. In your situation, you explain exactly what you did that some of your critics have said is defund the police, that I think probably takes a little bit of a nuanced discussion to really explain. Yeah,
I absolutely will. In Kansas City, as the people of St. Louis will remember too, we have a state requirement of how much we put into our police department. We followed that. That's 20%. That leaves an extra $40 million. This year we decided as a city council to try to work with the Board of Police Commissioners on how they're spending that money. So we introduced and passed an ordinance that allows all that money, actually requires any of that money go back to the Board of Police Commissioners, the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. But we wanted to work with things like prevention, like community services, like our crisis intervention team officers. All those things that our police department does that so many neighborhood people say are important. Because when you look at policing, it's dealing often these days with people in crisis. It's dealing with folks in tough domestic situations. And so we wanted to make sure that we had money that was targeted to that area. So rather than just being some huge cut, as some people tried to allege, anybody who's actually read into it in Kansas City recognizes that it is actually making sure certain things are performed in Kansas City, making sure we get that neighborhood policing, making sure we have the mental health community services involvement, all done, by the way, through the Kansas City Police Department. This is not shifting to Truman Medical Center here. This is not shifting to the Quinton Lucas Cares About This Issue Fund. And that's where I think the more we've been able to discuss it, folks get it. Folks say, you know what, we like crisis intervention trained officers. We like making sure we have folks that are working in victim services at KCPD. And I think that's something that is going to do well for Kansas City long term.
I've talked to several of your officers before we visited. And, you know, some of them weren't happy with the optics of it.
Sure.
But their take was this. I heard one of your officers had a really nuanced take. He said if you send a social worker to a crime scene, you're going to have a dead social worker.
That's right.
But if you send a social worker to the jail after a 48-hour hold and you help a person, not just say, you know, do better, but if you help them, a lot of problems are mental health, identify those, get the health care treatment they need, maybe help them get a job. You really, I know there's a rural community that takes folks, and if you're over 28, you're in trouble for the second or third time, they'll actually take you with a social worker and help you get a place to live. There's an element for these things. Maybe it's not what some folks think. You're just going to send social workers out with guns to be shot. There is a way to help folks, so maybe you only have to arrest them once and not 4 times in 3 years.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, last Friday I was in Springfield with Mayor Ken McClure, spent time with the Springfield Police Department and at the Burrell Behavioral Health Center. And we talked about that very thing, how for Springfield PD, they're trying to get their officers back into the streets. And instead of, say, sending that same person to the Greene County Jail 25 different times, if you can get them picked up by one of our officers, why it's still important that they are involved. And the officer has a place to send them to get services. The officer has a place to say that, all right, you can take care of this person, make sure they're on their medication, what have you. That really saves us law enforcement time. That saves us costs long term in terms of corrections. It is vital for us. And that's what we're trying to do a better job of in Kansas City. You know, ever since I became mayor, we have invested heavily in the social worker program, but through the Kansas City Police Department, because they are not separate. When you show up to a scene and you see a lot of issues, you see maybe there was a homicide or something of that sort, and there's a 10-year-old there. We want to make make sure that somebody's working with that kid long term. That's what we're talking about. You know, I think those who tried to say it's defunding, first of all, had political reasons to do it, but I've seen cities that did that. And that is just taking money out of the budget, putting it in something different, never goes back to policing. Yep. That's not the Kansas City story, and that's not something that this mayor would support as long as I'm in office.
Okay, you have some folks from the Northland.
Yeah.
Republicans.
Yep.
Now, I understand politics is part of everything. Criticizing folks. If you can't be criticizing politics, you shouldn't be in it. But what would you say to someone that maybe not called for a special but somebody that has serious concerns? Yeah. Or I would doubt that if a legislator called you, you wouldn't sit down and talk to him.
Oh, I would sit down and talk to anybody who would call me. I think it's kind of the joy of this job. It seems tough sometimes, but it's actually fun. I've had a relationship with Tony Lutkemeyer since we were both younger lawyers and kind of operating in a different field than politics. And so while we probably disagree on this issue and several others, I would absolutely sit down and say, I think this enhances funding for the Kansas City Police Department. Our ordinances allow us to hire a new recruiting class. And we all have the same fundamental goal, which is to stop seeing young boys and young girls killed on the streets of Kansas City, St. Louis, so many other communities. And I hope we can come together, at least on some of these issues, and see how we can do it. Once you get past the rhetoric, I think there are ways to get that done.
Has any of the folks that have requested a special session about your decisions, have they asked to visit with you?
You know, as far as I know, no. I have invited myself and Tashara Jones, Mayor of St. Louis. I need to call her Mayor Jones more often now, not Tashara, but she's a friend. But we've invited folks to come walk our streets with us, come experience Kansas City and St. Louis. I had the fortune of doing that with Mayor Jones's predecessor. I actually campaigned with Mayor Jones during her campaign.
Tell me about the relationship there. How did that relationship? It looks like probably the strongest Kansas City St. Louis mayor relationship I've ever seen in my lifetime. How did that relationship begin, and why is it so strong?
I am so proud of it. In many ways, she's a mentor to me. She's somebody who, St. Louis politics is tough. KC ain't necessarily easier, but you talk about tough political jobs in Missouri, probably governor, mayor of St. Louis, and I don't know what comes next. And as I went through my run a few years ago, she called me. She said, how's it going? Here are some ideas I have, all that sort of stuff. And it meant a lot to me because I had seen what she'd gone through in 2017, got this close to winning. And I think that we recognize there are a lot of shared issues. If we find a way to get affordable housing built in Missouri, then that helps St. Louis and Kansas City a lot. If we manage to get some of our offenders off the streets, it helps St. Louis and Kansas City a lot. So I like listening to her, giving ideas of what we have in Kansas City, and every now and then maybe chuckling about some of the interesting things we deal with, because I know a lot of your viewers are to my political right, but I have a lot of people in this city who are to my political left, and Tashara does as well. And some of the proposals and ideas we get sometimes, we say, you want us to push that in Jeff City? So it's kind of fun where we get the professional side and the friend side. So
walk me through this. This will be the first session you both are in office.
Yep.
Is there a way to combine those requests? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Look, you're going to have some of those things that probably are non-starters in Jeff City, but there's probably ways. Kansas City has a long history, the city government working with the state. Mm-hmm. There's probably a way to move that ball down the field, right?
You know, I think it is. And I think step one is, first of all, showing up. And you've seen me do that a few different times. You saw Tashara do that fairly early.
She knows where the Capitol is. She used to work there.
Right, exactly. So she knows her way around, and she did that early in her mayoralty. So I think we will continue to work with each other. Another group that we've had for a while is with Ken McClure in Springfield, Brian Treese in Columbia, where we have the joint mayors group. Met with the governor a few years back. We'll continue to try to work as cohesively as we can to say, while we have different narrower issues, there are still some key things we care about, and you can expect to see us in Jefferson City anytime. To your question from before, if there is any state representative or state senator or anybody who wants to meet with me and says, Quinton Lucas, come to Jefferson City, or Quinton Lucas, come to the Boot Heel, I'm there, because I think it is important that we have those discussions. It has this great way of breaking down a lot of these divisions when you really get to talk to people.
Tell me about the Kansas City economy. I look at folks from Kansas City, they're very positive. Before COVID, that was one of the most bullish parts of the state on the economy. How are you emerging from COVID, and is some of that optimism coming back?
Well, I will tell you the most surprising thing is that the wedding industry alone, I think, will give every Missouri hotel some sense of survival, because those brides are ready. But more than anything, I think we had a good set of things going before. You're seeing economic development proposals coming up in Kansas City again. We've invested a lot in downtown Kansas City and midtown Kansas City. We're trying to do better moving that to our inner city, the east side of Kansas City, for those who know it. So that is a big part of what we're doing. But I have been heartened by the fact that you're seeing traffic coming back. You're seeing folks excited again. A lot of that is the work that my predecessors did, a lot of the work that our friends in the state Senate and the state House have done for years to make sure that Kansas City was dynamic and ready. But I'm proud of where we are. I'll also say this. I think we were fairly responsible with our orders along the way, the COVID-19 orders. There may be some who had disagreements, but I don't think you ever looked at Kansas City and said, what in the heck are they doing? It made sense. It allowed folks to reopen. It allowed businesses to stay open and survive throughout the pandemic. I'm proud of that, and I think that's helped us on the recovery side.
It was almost a Midwestern kind of show-me issue where you had, Kansas City was never on the front end of the most strict. It was certainly never on the back end of the least strict. It was somewhere in that Midwestern middle ground of, let's see what happens, show me what happens, show me if this works and doesn't, then show me how we respond. It was a very Midwestern approach, it felt like.
Well, that's exactly right. Some people say I never critique Democrats. The White House, actually, when the CDC updated their guidance that said, if you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask, you're vaccinated, you're not. I said, how do I tell somebody walking into the local shop, right, or heaven forbid, a store clerk who's trying to say, wait a minute, you can be here, you can't. That's why Kansas City largely changed its order pretty quickly. We have tried to be common sense the entire time. I think it's worked for us. We were the first professional sports franchise, the NFL Chiefs, to open up again. I think that was a model for the entire league. I think we've been a model for Major League Baseball getting back in the stands, and we'll continue to do so because that is kind of the Kansas City show-me attitude on how we do things.
So I assume you've been vaccinated?
I have, yes, sir.
You're one of the better communicators that we have on this show. Tell my mother in West Butler County, who is determined not to get vaccinated, talk her into it for me.
I will just say this about vaccination, and I understand while it's a personal choice, it allows us to go back to doing things that are normal. And here in Kansas City, sadly, we've recently lost a police officer to COVID-19. We're continuing to lose folks, too often to COVID-19. If you talk to any emergency department, they say that there are unvaccinated folks that are still dying, they're suffering from COVID-19. A lot of folks have taken it now, and for all of us, it's come out safely. So I can't encourage anyone more to take the vaccine. It allows us to finally get back to normal, and it allows you not to take that risk, not to take that chance. And this, by the way, is something that I would share with your mother. I've got a 21-year-old nephew in the Marine Corps who is a knucklehead, and of course he hasn't yet. He's like, well, me and the guys decided not to. I was able to talk him into it. So, I mean, if I can get some of those stubborn Marines to do it, I think it's worthwhile. It keeps you healthy. It keeps you safe.
Stubborn Marine might not be much of a match against the West Butler County Church Secretary, but last question. There's been a lot of talk about you considering running for United States Senate.
Sure.
Roy Blunt leaves the seat open. Where are you in those discussions with, I guess, your family and friends and supporters?
Well, let me just say this, we've noted my relationships with some folks on the right before. I will miss Senator Blunt. I think he has been effective. He has been a good advocate for Kansas City. While we disagree on some of those other issues, he has been vital in making sure important things get done here. So I would hope our next senator is in that model. I disagree with some of the viewpoints expressed by some of those who have announced right now on the right. I hope the left has a strong candidate. I'm mainly focused on Kansas City each and every day. So I'm just going to tell you honestly, I'm focused on being mayor, focused on making us safer, and we'll see where the stakes go later in terms of who's going to be our next U.S. senator. I think Senator Rizzo should consider it instead of me. He
would have to change the title. Be Senator Rizzo. Lastly, congratulations, new family, correct?
I am learning what it's like having an 8-week-old who doesn't sleep through the night, but I'm very blessed. Although I have to say this, to every Missourian who has more than one child, God bless you. Because just with the one, it feels like I've got several full-time jobs. It's an amazing blessing. Happy Father's Day to you and every father out there in Missouri. I'm pumped and blessed each day to have them.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for joining us this week in Missouri Politics.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back with that Senator Rizzo we referenced here on our Father's Day edition.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We are now joined by the man who's the center of seemingly everything in state government, the Senate Minority Leader, Senator John Rizzo. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me, Scott.
Okay, so I guess I'm speaking to the only minority leader in Senate history that actually made the motion to adjourn session. It all come down over a thing called the FRA, which, now you stop me if I describe this wrong, is a tax hospitals tax themselves that helps fund things like Medicaid. And frankly, the hospitals where I'm from would not exist without it. You got to pass a law to take this money back, and some Republicans want to put some what they consider pro-life measures on there. Now explain to me the problem with that.
Well, I would first disagree. I don't believe they are pro-life measures. I think they're anti-contraceptive measures. There's a clear delineation between what they're trying to do and what they're saying they're trying to do, and they're trying to conflate the two things. Mm-hmm. This is very easily deciphered with the language that we've seen so far. They're trying to make sure that contraceptives are not covered through the Medicaid program. And the bigger problem with that is, if that's not a big enough problem in itself, is the fact that it could question whether or not the feds continue the program. And as you said, we're talking about a $2 billion funding stream from the feds, and also $4 billion total if you count what the hospitals tax themselves at. So we're really taking a huge gamble. The Republican majority has taken a huge gamble by tinkering with this program that has been in effect for decades now, supported by Republicans and Democrats. The governor signed a clean FRA twice already, and now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this attack on contraceptives is bubbled up for some reason, because I don't know, maybe they've run out of pro-life things to do, and they're trying to conflate the two.
Do you think there's some political reality to the fact that if you just got elected in 2020, the Republicans have had the majority for 18 years, most of the things you would do from a pro-life standpoint have been done. There are very few abortions in the state of Missouri right now, a minuscule amount. And I know if you're truly pro-life, as many folks are, sure, you want that number to be zero. Yeah. But really, I think you're probably down to so few abortions, and so many of the pro-life measures folks dreamed about 20 years ago have been enacted. Yeah. I think you're running out of some things to do to maybe bolster pro-life credentials.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that they are kind of products of their own success for their own issues. And you know as well as I do that if you are a Republican in the Missouri legislature and you're just coming in, as you stated, you have to check the boxes, right? Mm-hmm. And the boxes you usually check are a pro-life bill of some sort, which there really isn't much room to go there, a pro-gun bill, which we found this past cycle, there isn't much to go there, to a point to where they passed a bill that's unconstitutional. The DOJ has now said that they can't do. And then tax cuts, which we have worked on in past different times, some supported by Democrats the last few years. And there's just not a lot of space in there to, so quote unquote, get your street cred with this new Republican Party, because there just isn't anywhere to go.
I think that is maybe where some of these things come from, is that to move the ball forward. I mean, you've moved it so far on the pro-life side, frankly, because the voters elect overwhelmingly pro-life majorities of this state. I think you're having to come up with some things that are unconstitutional, outside the box, whatever you want to say. And really, the FRA was not something that was ever thought of as pro-life or pro-choice. It's kind of been dragged into this debate because I'm not sure there's anything left in the debate.
Yeah, I would agree. They are risking, this is how much we need to really think about the total of this, $4 billion to the state of Missouri over birth control. That's how desperate they are to get their pro-life credibility up in the state of Missouri for this last year. It's absurd to me. I mean, that doesn't just affect women in their birth control issues. If in fact we lose this funding, that's going to affect people with diabetes. That's going to affect people with heart conditions. That's going to affect cancer treatments. That's going to affect a whole variety of issues throughout the state of Missouri, and they're gambling with it.
So I guess maybe it looks to me like the governor's going to come up with a call. You're probably going to be back to work this coming week or the week after. it's probably going to be a call that will allow for some form of some pro-life language to be on this FRA. My question to you is, so they pass this, right? And they send this to Washington, and Washington calls back and says, Governor Parson, you can't do this. Again, frank, fair enough. And he says, well, we're going to sue you. And Eric Schmidt, I think, would be all too glad to sue over this. Yeah. And the federal government says, okay, sue us. We'll be glad to defend ourselves. And 2 years from now, a judge says you can or can't do this. Yeah. In the meantime, hospitals are open, correct?
I would assume so. That would depend upon the court proceedings. I would also take into consideration the Supreme Court just struck down the challenge that the Attorney General had to Obamacare that he added his name to today, 7-2 to, with this quote unquote Trump Supreme Court struck down the lawsuit that different states, including Missouri, had joined into. So this whole back and forth of filing lawsuits and this different types of legislation that they know are unconstitutional to get publicity and move the football forward in their political careers is hurting Missourians, and it's hurting Americans, and it's hurting our whole back and forth that we have in politics. We need to find places where we can work together on things. The FRA had been that thing for decades, and now that has become a political football.
Okay, so the end of session, you were very clear about that you felt the Senate leadership had not kept their word to you. And you had said maybe the last time this happened, which was another kind of a boondoggle of a PQ on a special session last summer, ended poorly. You said maybe we should have brought a little retribution for that as the Senate minority. Coming into this special session, what kind of mood is Senator Rizzo in?
I think that we are adults. I think the Democratic caucus has to be the adults in the room and understand that this is a $4 billion funding source. I also think that we have to do what we need to do to let people know exactly why this is being held up and why we didn't get it passed in special session, and it's because of an extremist subsection of the Republican Party in the Senate that wants to attack women's birth control, and see if we can work from that and maybe change that or do what we can do to make it better. And then at a certain point we'll have to figure out where the caucus is at and how far that they want to push it.
Talk about something else that passed. I just kind of noticed the Democrats when the thing is called SAPA, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, I guess. They you kind of let that go, and I picked up from you and some of your colleagues, and I don't know if you actually said this out loud, but one of the reasons why maybe you didn't hold that up or you did deals to let that go was you were pretty confident that wouldn't stand a court challenge. Now, if I'm mistaken, this bill makes it illegal for a Missouri police officer to enforce a federal gun law that's stricter than Missouri's. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems like that'd be a challenging thing for an officer to decide in the fly how to go back and know which one. But and then this week the Department of Justice sent down a letter that says this will not work. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like you would have been that surprised by that letter.
No. We looked through it, obviously during session. We felt like it was blatantly unconstitutional. We also felt like it was a slap in the face to law enforcement in the state of Missouri. They could be fined up to $50,000 for enforcing gun laws in the state of Missouri. There was no delineation of which ones. So, we get this back the blue yes. stuff from the Republican Party constantly, but yet they refuse to have a commission on what happened on January 6th. They refuse to support the police officers by putting them in a grab bag to not knowing which laws they can enforce and can't enforce when it comes to guns without getting fined or being a target by the state of Missouri.
It is a challenge legislatively. I mean, in November, you were on the ballot. Your colleagues ran, and the most effective message I heard was that Democrats were for defund the police. And there are some Democrats in cities that is a public policy they advocate pretty loudly. But it was hung around the neck of everybody in the state, every other Democrat in the state. Mm-hmm. Then come January, there's a bill that, let's be honest, a police officer doesn't want more restrictions that could fine them personally. Do you worry that maybe police officers, they're becoming more Republican, but they could start becoming assumed if they still support Republicans regardless of the policies that might hurt those officers?
Well, I think the fact that we're even going down the road of are the police becoming more Republican or Democrat probably is a bad thing for police officers. Police officers should enforce the law. They should carry themselves with dignity and respect to the community, and they should be there to maintain order in situations. They shouldn't be thinking about, am I a Trump guy? Am I a Biden guy? Or any of that issue. They should be there to maintain law and order and to be someone that the community can count on to come to their home, into their home when they have problems and situations that they need to resolve, and be the cool head in the room. And I hope that we're not getting to a place in the United States, and especially in Missouri and Kansas City, where we're trying to decide if the officers that's showing up to my house is a Trump person or a Biden person. Are they wearing a MAGA hat or not? I mean, that's not what they should be. That's not what I don't think anybody wants them to be.
So before I let you go, there's somebody that has been known as the cool head in the room many times.
Yep.
Former Governor Jay Nixon, discussing running for U.S. Senate, backed you in your career. Somebody I know that you think highly of.
Yeah.
Where is he at? I get the sense he's enjoying this, at least people suggesting that he run for U.S. Senate. Where do you think he is in that process?
You know, I'm obviously biased. You know, the governor has been a friend of mine for a long time, and we've enjoyed a personal relationship, and I've looked to him for advice on a lot of different issues. I definitely think he is a very articulate person that is looking at all the angles of what that race might be. As long as Eric Greitens and McCluskey are the front runners in that race, I think anything is possible. I don't see Eric Greitens ceding the front position in that Republican primary, which I think makes the Democratic nominee a good place to be.
All right, let me just ask you the direct question.
Sure.
We get to Christmas time. We get back to January. You're heading back to Jeff City, and there are legitimate polls and the consensus is Eric Greitens is the clear front runner for U.S. Senate. You're driving to the Capitol in January. Does Jay Nixon show up in February to file for office?
I think the conversations that I've had with him, I think he is in a good place with his family and his work right now. And do I think that Jay Nixon 20 years ago would? Absolutely. Absolutely. But I do think that for the first time in his life, he's making decisions based on what his retirement might look like. And you know, he's enjoying where he's at. He's enjoying fishing. He's enjoying being part of Missouri and traveling and getting out there. So he knows what it takes to win a statewide seat. He's done it multiple times. And it's a decision he's going to have to make for himself.
I think we'll all note that you didn't answer that, but I'm going to ask you again as we get closer. Maybe you can polish that up. Senator, thank you so much, and we'll see you in Jeff City.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Scott.
Thank you guys for joining us. We'll be back with you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.
Guys, thank you so much for watching the show. I want to tell you about a new thing we're offering. It's the Missouri Times Podcast Network. You'll get this show every week. If you want to listen to it in your car, you don't have time to watch it. You'll get our Show in Missouri podcast, History of Missouri, one county at a time. You'll also get our midweek update. Once a week, I throw up the Facebook Live. We talk politics, usually eat a lunch and discuss politics. You'll get to hear all those things come right to your phone. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Android. Missouri Times Podcast Network. Please join us and subscribe.